bracelets, and standing up against, oh, we're recording. Okay. So Sego, if you guys are watching the recording, and we just wrapped up the film screening of Blood and Water, and I was just talking about how far I've come from, creating that documentary myself, editing, music, all the singing in it is me and my brother, and just putting that all together, and how far I've come since then, from 3 years ago on this path, wrapping up my second documentary, and just seeing things that I really couldn't unsee. Um, Going through, just a lot of people ask me, like, why are you willing to put your body on the line as a land defender? Why are you willing to, go up against a colonial wall of violence, like literally hundreds of RCMP in formation, attack dogs, assault rifles, helicopters, all used against land defenders, protecting a river? Like, why are you willing to do that? And a lot of that comes back to the Ohana Garuadegua, that Thanksgiving address at the beginning, that relationship that I have with water. It's not just a resource, but it's a living entity. It's a part of my family, and it's become a friend and a very close confidant, a healing, a medicine for me, and a safe place. So when you think of it like that, and it's part of your family, if it was your sister or your brother or your mother that was being, ripped open and poisoned and destroyed and killed and tortured, and what would you do? You would stand up, you would fight back, you would defend her. You would not let that happen. So, standing on that bridge when that wall of force came towards me, in Wet'suwet'en, it was November 17th, 2 years ago now. And 2 years, been going through courts, and going through the process of, being criminally charged. But I remember going out there, to Wet'suwet'en territory, and going to this river, the Wenzikwa. And if you're out there, follow Yinta Access, follow what's going on out there, because it's still happening. But I put my hands in this river, and I put my hands to my lips, and I drank from the river. And the moment that the water touched my lips, it was like electricity. It was like lightning bolts, like just shocks through my whole body. And I was like, what? This is how water's supposed to be. This water is alive. It's inside of me. It's activating me. And that was like the defining moment when water completely changed for me. And I was like, there is no way. We have to protect this. This is how water, in like its purest form, glacier fed, pristine river. And my children will never get a chance to drink from a clean river. The chances of that, my river that you saw in the film, the Grand River, I wouldn't even let them swim in it, let alone drink from it or eat anything from it. So, and that's the case for most of us. We've never drank from a clean water source. And it puts it into perspective of our responsibility. So as I was standing there on that bridge with fellow land defenders, my brother as well there, my partner Skylar Williams was there as well, and just having this moment of, I'm in the face of, I'm actually going to be in trouble. I've never been arrested. I've never been in trouble with the law, but like, this is a moment where I had to ask myself a really hard question. And I had to ask myself, whose laws do I live by? And the law of the land, the law of this water, the law that I have a responsibility as as a relative of this water to protect it. That law was greater than any injunctions, colonial systems that had been put in place to dispossess Indigenous people from their lands since contact. So, it was like, okay. And then my charges, actually, as we progressed, were amplified to criminal charges because it was being said, it was being seen that I was using my platform, I was using, my network and my followers and my audience to promote people to break the law. And for me, it's not about telling somebody to go, shut down a highway or shut down a railroad or dig up a dig up a bypass, or it's for me, it's about asking people to take personal responsibility, to get their heads from being buried in the sand and look up and like realize and ask themselves, whose laws do you live by, whose laws have been protecting the water. I think if I ask most of you right now, how much water have you used today? And washing dishes, laundry. I ask this question often when I'm talking to people, and it can sometimes bring up a little bit of laughter. But do you remember at the beginning of the pandemic when we ran out of toilet paper? They remember that? And it you were actually there was like a fear, right? Because there wasn't enough of something. There was a limited supply. People were fighting over it in the parking lots. People were hoarding it in their basements filled with toilet paper, and there was none on the shelves. Now, as hilarious as that sounds, switch that and change the situation to be about water. And we ran out of water. There's a limited supply. Only a certain amount comes in every week. Only the rich people have access. I met a woman in Chile, and she was telling me about the privatization of water in Chile and South America. And if you have enough money, you can buy a river. So the rich people own all the rivers. But back to our story of like water being in short supply, you having a limited quantity allowed to you. Just think about that and how scary that would be in comparison to our toilet paper shortage, right? And for Indigenous communities right now, that is a reality. I have seen it with my own eyes. I have delivered. Niskandiga is on a 1.7 liter water ration per person per day. You're probably like, Niskandiga? What's Niskandiga? Niskandiga has just passed 10,000 days on a boil water advisory. That's 27 years. Now, if you're in Ontario, you're probably familiar with Walkerton water crisis. Walkerton went on boil water advisory for 11 days. It was all over the news. Everyone knew about it. People were charged. People took accountability. Yet Niskandiga, people have no idea it exists. And I sat down with the chief. I sat down during the filming of my documentary, my new documentary, and he said, we're in a state of emergency. We've declared a state of emergency, and not because of the water shortage, but because of the youth suicide and the shocking rate that these Indigenous youth are taking their own lives. He said, Layla, I have performed CPR on 26 youth in this community. Children I know, and I have not been able to save one. And the brokenness that you could feel in this man, that this is what I'm saying, as I've went on this journey from community to community, I have heard things and seen things that I cannot unsee. And so as a storyteller, as a content creator, as a video filmmaker, as a speaker, I'm like, I have to share these stories. People have to see what I've seen and be able to unsee it, or not be able to unsee it. So I know we're running out of time. I only have till well, I'm on the West Coast right now till 1:30 my time. So I want to open it up to questions. I want you to have a chance to ask any questions. I did put, just even my personal email, because this is something that is a passion for me. And I want to, in any way be there to support your journey to learn and grow and be more active and take more personal responsibility for your relationship and responsibility to the land and the water. So I'll pass it over to you, ladies, and you can facilitate if there's any questions that have come up. I don't want anyone to feel like they're going to ask a wrong question, or they're going to offend me in any way. My experience with the court systems, my experience with injunctions, my experience with land defense, and also with storytelling, because like I said, I was just into Kamloops, and I was standing on the grounds of the residential school. And it was after I'd just taken the stage and sang my first solo set as a solo musician. My brother Logan, who's in the film, he's a very successful folk singer. But this was the first one of the first times I played by myself, and I just like was vibrating in this excitement. And I went up to the school, and I expected to be filled with a wave of sadness like I used to feel at the schools. But I felt like there was this celebration, like all the children were singing and laughing and dancing, and it was really, really powerful. So yeah, there are no off-topic questions. If you want to speak about things that you've experienced, things that stood out to you about the film, questions you have, this is your moment.
Thank you so much, Layla. That was so beautiful and powerful, and yeah, we really appreciate it. Yeah, one thing that I really took away was talking about the respect and responsibilities to the water, and I think that's an interesting perspective for us as like a human rights organization, thinking about it in terms of that. So I'm going to move over to some questions. We had a few prepared, and we'll ask some as well from the participants. So the first one we wanted to ask is, what are the connections between colonial expropriation, resource extraction, and missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit peoples? If you'd be able to speak to that, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, as part of my learning, there are roles and responsibilities within our communities, and you'll hear it echoed in many nations and many tribes and many Indigenous communities about the sacred connection that women have to water. And as a mother of four, my children were grown inside of my waters. I came from my mother's waters. She came from her grandmother's waters. And it's noted in some of our great laws and our teachings that it is the responsibility of the women to protect the water. So there's that there's that understanding of also, in protecting the water, what does that mean? In often cases, it puts us in a position where we're criminalized. You look at incarceration rates of Indigenous women in Canada, and it is alarming. It is alarming the amount of women that are in that system right now. Women, Two-Spirit, trans. Like this is our people are the ones that are easily criminalized for that. I do feel like there it's hard because there are sometimes wins. We just recently had a win at our own territory at 1492 Landback Lane, where, for the first time, Haudenosaunee law, this idea of that canoe that you learned about in the Goswenta, in the Tuwar Wampum, that canoe was referenced in a court of law as, these land defenders are simply following their responsibility as part of that canoe. And for me, that was like, whoa, to hear a judge say that. But at the same time, there's still women that are out there on the front lines that are completing their responsibility, our responsibility as Indigenous women, and being criminalized for that. And you can see, like, having been exposed to the mentality of policing with land defenders. I'll tell you a story that I don't even like thinking about it because it seems small, it seems insignificant, but it shakes me to my core every time. It was, at the moment when the RCMP were about to raid in Wet'suwet'en, and we could see them coming towards us. Something inside of me, I see this wall of violence and dominance, and they're like in full gear, and something inside of me just said, sing. So I sang what's called the Mohawk Water Song. You can find it on YouTube. I sang that, and I sang it to this wall of cops, and we all started singing. And it's like my one moment of regret is when the song was over, because as soon as we stopped singing, that's when they raided, and that's when they started pulling us off and arresting us. And I was like, oh, I should have just sang that song for, for 56 hours, the song that never ends. But yeah, so finally they did arrest me, and they took me off that bridge in handcuffs. And there was this mentality of the police that it was fun. It was funny or something. I remember the police officer put me in the back of his car, and I'm shook. I've never been arrested. Like, this is a crazy experience for me. I'm like in some kind of shock. But he looks down at me, and I look up from the window with my hands in cuffs, and he smiles and he winks at me. And it was like this moment of just like, I can't do anything about it. And even like, I felt like he's not like, it's not illegal to wink at an Indigenous woman that you just arrested for standing up for the water in the middle, after she just sang this song. Like, it's not illegal, but it stuck with me. And like, I can still see his face. I can still, like, it's just like this feeling of powerlessness. And I think that transcends into so many situations with Indigenous women, two-spirit, transgendered. Like, this is something that is common for us to feel. And so when you're already being criminalized as a land offender, and then you're put into these systems that are corrupt and broken, it's even more challenging. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. More than. Thank you so much. Um, so I'm going to ask one more question, then I will turn it over to Rachel to take a few. So we're wondering if this is a global issue, if you could speak to those connections. So one participant was asking about the Ganges River in India, which people see as a living being. How do you feel about the impact of resource extraction in other spaces and communities?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things that is funny when I share the Thanksgiving address, and when I'll be at an event or a convention or something, people will come up to me from all different races, all different territories and spaces, and say, we have something similar. We have similar beliefs. We have these commonalities of seeing life around us, seeing plants, animals, water, air as, like this life force that is alive. So I think that definitely has parallels internationally. The struggle for water, the oppression of Indigenous communities for water, absolutely has parallels. I've spoke with these people. It's so interesting. At the United Nations in France, we're all sitting at a table, and we have headphones on, and we all speak different languages. Like, every one of us speaks a different language, and we're being interpreted in our headphones, but we're all saying the same things. And that really hit me at that table. Just even talking about some of the tactics that have worked in land defense, like occupation, and being able to gain support and build legal funds, because that's another issue, is like, even fighting any of these issues takes millions of dollars in legal funds, to change the laws, to even stand a chance at changing legislation. So like, it was just really, really powerful to see that. Now, as far as resource extraction, I just drove through highway number 1 in BC, and you see these majestic, scenic views of this beautiful land, and like, this whole time we're driving along, and I could see this pipeline, going along the highway, and I'm just like, I drive over these beautiful creeks. That creek, actually, that I was standing on, that bridge when I was arrested, is no longer there, and that creek has been destroyed. And so, like, a part of me is like, oh, like, And there, like people will say, well, you drive a car, you need gas, you utilize these advantages of resource extraction. And I know that we do, but we must have awareness when we do it. We must have responsibility, and we can't just say, well, just because it's okay with society, it's going to be okay if I, just have 17 garbage, garbage bags going to the dump every week. Like, that garbage doesn't just disappear. These are things that we have to take ownership for. So will there be resource extraction? Yes. Is it going to completely stop? No, but our own personal usage as we grow as as a collaborative woke society, I think that that's something that can make an impact. It's even, we say, well, I'm just one person, but we act as a unit. I feel like these changes, we if we wait for the law to change around protecting water, that's going to take too long. We have to take personal responsibility. We're not going to see some magical legislation change and government change come down from the top, from Trudeau. It's going to rise from the bottom. It's going to rise from the ground up, as a unified force. And that's why organizations like Amnesty International, organizations that are hosting these kinds of spaces for discussion. I was speaking with a teacher. I did a talk for a teacher's class, grade 5, and she made this wall of land defenders in her classroom. And I looked at that wall in this classroom and I said, every single one of those people up there has been arrested. And here are these children that are seeing us as protectors of the water and changing what those laws mean, what those laws against us that are being used against land defenders actually mean. And for me, it was just like, whoa, that's a powerful moment. And we got to recognize the wins. We got to hold on to those. We got to amplify those as a collective force.
Thank you for that, Layla. And I know that we're tight on time, but before I lead into the next question, I actually just wanted to speak to how I actually visited your community back in 2020. So Six Nations of the Grand River. And so this was specifically to meet with Makasha Looking Horse. I think you might know her. So she's a Lakota and Mohawk water defender from the Wolf Clan. And I was able to hear from her role in the fight against Nestle illegally bottling water from the Six Nations aquifer on expired permits. And, not a cent of the money that was generated was cycled back into community. And so this visit was to assist in an advocacy project relating to the comparison between the Indigenous water crisis and the higher quality of water provided to non-Indigenous communities, specifically Hamilton or Brantford, Ontario, which is just a drive away from Six Nations. And so that brings me to the question of what really needs to be done to hold states and corporate actors accountable for these human rights abuses. And so one audience member specifically asked about pushing for a shift of the mainstream attitude of seeing water and other parts of nature as commodities rather than seeing them as living things, which are part of the greater whole, as are we.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is might not seem that big. And I wish that I could have an answer on how we could change things and how things could change. For me, it comes down to the work that I know that I can do. And the work that I know that I can do is to help open up our perspective to seeing water, seeing land, seeing trees as part of our relationship, part of our relatives. And I did a workshop last summer with the Ontario Nurses Association, so all of our healthcare workers, and we went out to the land. And on the first day I had them introduce themselves, which basically means you going up to a tree and introducing, hi, I'm Layla Stotts. I'm Mohawk Turtle Clan. I live on this territory, and I'm really honored to meet you, and I'm grateful for our connection in this relationship that we have to, and the thought of talking to a tree is crazy. It's believe me, the first time I asked an elder, I wanted to make a drum, and I said, what kind of wood should I use to make a drum? And he says, well, why don't you go ask the tree? And I was just like, what do you mean? Ask the tree. That's not an answer. And he's like, well, you never talked to a tree? And he says, well, I want you to think of a tree that knows you. Think of a tree that's been there and that knows who you are. And I want you to go and I want you to introduce yourself to that tree and speak. And the when we speak words, there's a vibration, there's a frequency that comes out of us that you're hearing from whatever device that's going into your ears, that you're feeling me, like you're feeling me inside of you, just like that tree is feeling you when you speak to it. And so I have, these nurses, first day they were like really timid and like felt weird and like somebody's gonna look at them crazy for talking to a tree. And then by the third day, they were going to their tree, they were sharing their growth, their thoughts, and they were like genuinely so grateful that that I had opened up this relationship. And I was like, I didn't do it, you did. You just had to, it was there all along. And them talking about their fear at the beginning, and then at the end they're holding this tree and they can feel it, they can feel that connection. And I was like, you know what, that was there. We just don't take the time. We just don't give the space or think it's important, or there's too many things happening. But really, that's the most important thing. That's everything. Is if we don't have a sustainable earth and a sustainable mother, then we have nothing. Our Wi-Fi, our technology, our Snapchat, our sizzle reels, or whatever, like our social media, that doesn't matter. Nothing matters if there is no earth. So yeah, I think that really puts it into perspective for us to take action and to take our personal responsibility to make a change. And what can you do? You can be a megaphone for this message today. You can amplify this message today. You can share something that you learned here, something you experienced, something you heard, something that led you down a path of learning and research, something that spoke to you, and you can share it, coming from you. So it's not just land defenders, it's not just Indigenous communities, it's like that group voice, that international voice, wherever you are in the world, for that deeper connection, responsibility, and protection of land and water, so that we're not just willing to turn a tap on and off and say, oh, somebody's going to take care of it. Oh, I'm sure someone's protecting it. Oh, I'm sure someone's keeping it clean, right? No, we're going to take a personal ownership of it. And as an army, we will grow.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one more question. I also just want to mention how much appreciation there is in the chat. I don't know if you've been able to see it, Layla, but everyone is super grateful. So the last question I'm going to ask is, in terms of the defense of the land and water, what have the impacts been on children's rights, health and well-being of women and gender diverse people? And what role does community play in ensuring the protection of lands and waters for future generations? So I think you've already touched on some of that, but if you have more to add on those.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we see it, we're borrowing these lands from our children and their children, and they don't belong to us, but we're in relationship with them. So being able to teach our children that, being able to have our kids see a body of water, see a tree, and realize it's not just there to look pretty, or to make oxygen or do a chemical thing, but it feels us, it knows us. One of the studies that my kids thought was really fascinating was Dr. Matsumoto, and he did a study of the effects on water of our verbal communication. So he would speak words, he would speak love, he would speak kindness and joy, and observe under a microscope what was happening to the water. And my kids just thought it was fascinating to see how it changed from when you get into jealousy, you get into anger and hate, how the chemical composition of the water changed. And it was like, oh, it hears us, it hears what we're saying. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm like what we're trying to express to you. And it was just like such a powerful moment. So that's something that's to keep our children engaged in their relationship is really important. And I feel like the way forward, the way to change anything that's happening right now is simply with that expansion of our mind. So that idea that once we taste something, once I tasted that water at that Winziqua, I couldn't untaste it. Like water, I couldn't close the door on water. I can just say, oh, it doesn't matter anymore. Every time I'm in contact with water, I feel like there's that connection, that relationship, and that honoring. And that's something that's like a muscle. And so when you think about your relationship like a muscle, and like you don't just get ripped from doing a couple biceps, right? You practice it consistently. So that's why, taking that time and space for the Thanksgiving address, for whatever way it is that you honor your relationship and you give that gratitude and that connection, it's going to grow, and you're going to start to see life in a different way. And once you do, you operate differently. And if we all operate differently, that might be something. And just holding accountability, holding our legal system to holding accountability to our policing systems, our governments, our legislation, being on board with those that are actively speaking out and supporting them and amplifying their voices, and then having it come from you. So yeah, like suddenly you're like, hey, it's actually my kid's teacher, and the Nancy down the street, and Tom down at the golf course, he was talking about land back, and suddenly it's a community conversation. And I know as far as community goes, it's essential in our Indigenous worldview. It's like that is the life force. We say it takes a village. It takes a village. In Mohawk, the word for mother, Ista, is the same as the word for auntie, Ista, because we take care of each other. And I've seen it do amazing things in some of our territories. In 2006, we had an occupation of land against developers, and that land is still being taken care of by our community. Just by simply occupying the space and creating community there. So yeah, I think that's huge, and our communities are central to, you'll believe something more from someone within your community than you would from, CNN news. So you be the one to share the real news, the true news, have it come from you, because then, people will take it to heart.
Thank you, Layla. I mean, I'm on behalf of everyone. We would love to hear you talk for hours and hours, and unfortunately, we have the time.
I know.
So we need to proceed into the actions now, which is, of course, a grave part of the solidarity that we're sharing with your Indigenous community, as well as Indigenous peoples worldwide, and especially in Canada and North America. So first off, all of these links to the actions will be pasted in the chat for participants. And so then you can visit the web links, those pages, as well as you'll receive some more information if you are signed up to Amnesty newsletters. So first, you can sign the Amnesty International e-action that calls on the Government of Canada and Export Development Canada to uphold its international commitments and phase out fossil fuel expansion by, let me see, sorry, the script just got cut off. To phase out fossil fuel expansion. Annika, can you please proceed? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry if I messed up the document, I'm not quite sure. So yeah, so to phase out fossil fuel expansion by 2030 is that first action. We also have an e-action calling on the governments of Canada and British Columbia to end the criminalization of Wet'suwet'en land defenders. And so the thing that I think you are seeing on your screen now is that tomorrow, Monday, July 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern time, the Wet'suwet'en Nation will share their struggle to defend their unceded ancestral territory against the construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. So you can watch that hearing live by registering on Zoom, and the link will be shared as well to that Zoom registration. So it's a good way to show solidarity if you're available. And then lastly, you can create solidarity banners to show your support for Indigenous women and to us LGBTQIA plus land and water defenders in your community. And I might just share an image in the chat from one of our, from the workshop that happened earlier this year. Yeah, so Rachel, would you like to finish it off or?
Yeah, just for our closing, thank you everyone for coming out. I mean, this is, as Layla mentioned, this is just one of many first steps in showing your solidarity and amplifying the voices of Indigenous speakers. And so tomorrow, actually Monday, July 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the Wet'suwet'en Nation will share its struggle to defend its unceded ancestral territory against the construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. And so this is before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and you'll be able to watch the hearing live by registering on Zoom. And so many Indigenous organizations, actors, allies, and activists, not only in Canada, but around the world, are going to be tuning in because this is very much a major event. This issue with Wet'suwet'en Nation, ERCMP invading and raiding their land, as well as other state actors. This has been going on for years, and it is obviously escalating, and Amnesty has been documenting it with our own research team going out and recording some of those human rights violations. So please try and register for that if you're available. And Annika did just share a photo of that banner that we made back at the Amnesty annual general meeting in June. But thank you everyone. And Annika, if you have anything else to share.
Not for me, thank you so much. And thanks again to Layla and everyone who was involved in organizing and everyone who came.